stunned and shocked by the need within Fairfield County of children who were food insecure and fell below the poverty level. So they started with 50 schools in, 50 students at Jonas School in Stamford. And they've now grown it to, we're now serving over 4,500 children in 185 schools within Fairfield County and then 2 in New York. So we're here today to let you guys know that we've come up with some programs. Packing in the warehouse is how we use a lot of our volunteers. So they're 14 or older, but we wanted to come up with, we get questions all the time from this age group about how can I help support my child in philanthropy and philanthropy work and getting them involved. So we've put some flyers out on the tables, and this is, just to let you know a little bit about it, so it's shelf-stable meals that we pack. There are 3 different, we work with nutritionists to put together 3 different meals so that so if they get them this meal bag, they get on Fridays typically. They take them home for the weekends, and it's all shelf-stable. It has proteins in it, some snacks because they don't go home right after school usually, so it needs to be something that's not refrigerated. So that's usually what we pack in the warehouse. And then we have some events that we wanted to bring to your attention where if you guys wanted to get involved, that's Andy and I are volunteers, and I have 4 kids. They went through the West School, middle school, and then the high school. I'm an 8th grader now, he's a baby. But I got involved, just wanted to do something extra, and filling the blanks was always something that the children got involved with through different organizations. So, like if you have a Girl Scout or a Brownie troop or Boy Scout troop or something that we're looking for them to do, we have lots of different activities that we kids can do that will really support our real efforts here. The other things we purchase 99% of our food because we want to make sure that it's equal across all the children we're delivering to in all the schools. So we have an event scheduled here, which is Unite to Fight is our one that's in April, and if anybody here wants to get more involved, we're always looking for community members for these events, and then your children can sign up to participate in all the information's on the website. We have an annual golf outing. We're going to do pickleball this summer, and plates from Purpose, and then our holiday backpack program, which some of you might be familiar with. There's also a sheet fundraising for kids, which gives you a lot of different ideas. We're going to update the sheets because it used to be $6 to feed a child. Now it's $10 to feed a child just since September. So the inflation's gone up. This is our Unite to Fight flyer, and you can scan the QR code to get more information. And then this is our calendar of events, which sort of outlines how your children can participate in the program. So that really sort of covers it. Unless there are questions that you guys have about the organization or something. Anyway, well, thank you so much for your time, and we'll just leave the sheets and please pick them up on your way out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do know that it's a fantastic way for you to volunteer with your children. I live in Westport, and I know a lot of kids do go, especially high school kids when you're trying to pull them in. So, good morning. As I introduce myself, I'm Lydia Zeal. I'm the Education and Program Manager for New Canaan CARES. For those of you that are potentially unfamiliar with CARES, our mission is to advance the health and well-being of youth and families through responsive educational programming that supports parenting skills, positive youth development, and a healthy lifestyle. Just want to thank you to East, West, and South PTCs for having us here today. And I also want to thank our CARES rep who helped us come up with this topic. It's a very pertinent topic for all of us. Kelly Dalmazio, Laura Del Rossi, and Destiny Icard. It's something we all need. So we're excited to have Dr. Michelle Albright here with us to talk about sustaining balance in our active lifestyle. Michelle has received a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She's completed an internship at the University of Maryland and was a National Institute of Mental Health postdoctoral fellow at New York University. Michelle is taught at the college and graduate level and as frequently presents workshops for children, families, and educators. She's also an experienced clinician and conducts individual, couples, and family therapy, as well as parenting groups. Her area of interest and expertise includes social emotional learning and emotional intelligence, school readiness, adolescent development, family involvement, and school-family partnerships. And she recognizes the importance of helping families and educators manage their own stress and sanity while trying to nurture those happy and healthy little children. Something we can all relate to. We look forward to her help today. Thank you.
Good morning. This is coordination for me to have a clicker and a microphone, so bear with me. The most important, I guess, credential or qualification is I'm also a mom. I have 2 children, one in college, one just about to finish high school, and all those degrees and the internships and blah, 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 they're lovely and all. But sort of my living home lab, as I like to call it, being a parent is really what I think makes it call. So my goal today is to talk a little bit how we can manage our own stress and frustration and model that for our kids and hopefully impart that for our children too. And this is a cartoon that I love because I think for so many of us, outside usually looks pretty good. And often inside, underneath it, there's a lot going on. And sometimes our good friends let us into that, sometimes family lets us into that, but sometimes it's also hard to imagine because sometimes we feel like, is anyone else feeling what I feel? And the answer is, everybody's feeling it. So these are some statistics, and I think Maureen's going to make all these available on the website, so if you're like me and old and trying to sprint, we'll get to the numbers later. So the American Psychological Association every year does a Stress in America survey, and this was actually the 2020 and 2021 findings. And basically the quick summary is everybody's feeling a whole lot of stress and continuing to feel more stress. And this is based on a sample of a little over 3,000 adults, age 18 and up from the United States. And the key here is that, lots of things are stressing us out. That families actually and family responsibilities are a big source of stress. When we look at actually the 2022 results, not so encouraging. Everyone is continuing to feel stressed. And actually, we see that stress levels and sort of reported stress are higher for younger people. I guess the encouraging, if you're in your 50s like I am, it gets lower, things start looking better. And some of that, when we think about, although it's not clear from the research, because it was really just sort of reporting out, is that as we get older, that we actually learn better ways to manage and tolerate our stress. Is that as our kids get older, they learn better ways, and then that sort of reverberates for us. But something to think about. So in terms of what do we do about this, we are feeling it. There's a lot of stress out there. How do we manage it? So if you just Google managing stress, 3 gazillion and something results come up in 0.02 seconds. What's really interesting also, if you look, even my little Google search, in addition to sort of the stacks of papers and research and journal articles I have on my desk, and the gazillion books out there when you go to Barnes & Noble, is you can find 1, 2, 3s, you can find ABCs. There are lists of 3, 5, 7, 12 top ways to manage your stress. And there are a lot of common sort of things there, but there's no one way, right? The Google result isn't one. There's not one book on the shelf at Barnes & Noble. There's not one person out there. I'm curious if anyone would like to volunteer a little bit. I do have prizes for people that speak. What is some way you all can manage stress? Does anyone want to share?
Meditation.
That's an awesome one. So meditation and deep breathing. All right. So after you meditate and deep breathe, here's a nice like scented soap that can also make us feel really nice. So meditation and deep breathing is actually a great way to manage stress. There's lots of fabulous research out there. The other thing when we think about stress is it's a brain and a body emotion, right? When we think about emotions, there's a lovely mood meter over there. My colleague Mark, we worked together for a long time. Part of what the mood meter tries to get us to attend to is that emotions have both a physical component and sort of a valence or a like happy or sad, right? Positive or negative. When we think about the experience of stress and other emotions, it's a head-to-toe experience, right? Often there's a physical, somatic sensation that goes with it. There's a thought that goes with it, and there's a pervasive feeling with it. Meditation can help us sort of balance ourselves, find a way to manage those. Sensory things, like yummy scented soaps, can also be great. Any other ways you all have to manage stress?
Physical activity.
Physical activity is a great one. Here's some tape, because sometimes we do whatever we can to tape it all together when we're stressed out, and we'll find anywhere we can. So physical activity, again, that experience, when we think about uncomfortable emotions, they tend to be more high energy, discomfort. When you think about being angry or frustrated, like go to stamping, throwing something, right? It's a high energy emotion we want to get rid of. Often things like sadness, depression, some of those are lower energy, kind of want to curl up and go down. So often that physical outburst, that physical sort of off-gassing feeling can help us manage emotion. Other ways people manage their stress. Good prizes in there. There's funny stuff. Yes?
Just being with friends or other people.
Being with friends. Awesome. So social connection is a wonderful, wonderful way to manage stress. Obviously, during COVID and the pandemic, we all realized just how valuable it was. So here's a way you can write down emotions and send notes to people about how you're feeling, what's going on. Part of why, one of the many reasons why the pandemic really was so complicated and so hard for so many of us to tolerate was we lost a lot of those social connections. It also compromised some of those great stress relievers we usually do. We maybe couldn't go to the gym and get that exercise. We can meditate at home, but if we were used to doing that with people or going to classes, that may hurt. More prizes to come. I think what's also challenging about these ideas about managing stress is these things sound great, right? Meditation, exercise, connection. In fact, I'm going to give you a little list later that has some great ideas. They all sound good, and we have these ideas of what we should, the dreaded S word, right? What we should be doing, what we know we're supposed to be doing. This idea that we feel scrambled and like going in a million directions, and yet we know we're supposed to be there nicely meditating, or we know we're supposed to be outside having fun with our kids. It's hard to imagine that when we're trying to get everyone out the door, and maybe we have a job or someplace to be, and the house is a mess, and the dog probably just peed on the rug for the third time, and we're trying to figure out how to do this. And it's really hard sometimes to translate this awareness into action and find a way that works for us. This is another cartoon that I wrote about this idea of I have to think about my breathing too. Right? I'm just supposed to do that naturally, and now I have to think about it. And so one of the things I'd really like to talk about today is given this notion about how we do feel stressed, about how life is challenging, and we're all busy and there's so much going on. What are the ways we can make it work for us? And I like to use the lasagna metaphor. Lasagna comes in many forms and many flavors. I don't know about all you in my house. Is that working? All right. In my house, lasagna comes in many forms and many flavors. I have a vegetarian in the house. I have a meat lover in the house. So we often make the spinach lasagna, half meat, half no meat. And, there's almost like you have to put a barrier down the middle because if a little meat piece gets on the other side. So, and I'd like to argue, I don't know what the best kind of lasagna is. There are kinds without tomato sauce. There are kinds with multiple vegetables. There are kinds with meat, all sorts of things. Everybody's lasagna is a little different. And again, if we Google lasagna recipe, they're probably like a gazillion recipes. And the idea is really what works for you, right? If in your house you need to make a separate meat and a separate veggie, great. If in your house you have someone who's gluten-free, one I usually make time to time is the jar sauce. I have to make the homemade mix, and you put it in, and it's done, and it's an easy process. So I'd like everyone to take a moment, because the idea of today is to find the recipe that works for you. So I'd like everyone to take a moment and think for you how you're feeling in this very moment, this very day, how you're feeling, and how maybe you would like to feel. If there's anything, even again, we're only on Tuesday morning, but even this week already, and I would maybe venture even today already, you probably will probably have a few things where I'm like, ooh, that was a little rough, or maybe that went really well. Probably a little mixture of both. So just take a moment and reflect on some way that you're feeling now and something maybe you would like to change. And again, we're sort of early in February, so many of us might have a few of those resolutions still kicking around of things we said we were going to do differently this year. And I would love it if anyone would be willing to share something that they kind of would like to feel, how they would like to feel a little differently, something that they were hoping to change or hoping to do. Better? Reverb. Anyone want to share something that they, as they think about how they feel, and some way that they would maybe like to feel a little differently, maybe a little improvement, maybe a little fine tuning? Ah! Oh, that's such a good one. And I saw lots of little nods, like, yep, feel that too. And because it's Valentine's Day, a little chocolate, which actually can help stress relief too. Don't, probably not before bed if you want to sleep. All right, so that's something many of us, more sleep, right? It's on that list of the 3 gazillion Google search results of where we know it's good for us. Actually getting that more sleep can be challenging.
I feel pulled in 10 different directions at once. I can get
Okay. Another good one that I think many of us can understand, that idea of being stretched too thin, too much going on, and trying to figure out a way to focus and actually complete something, right? I'll even use the M word, the mindful word, right? Or the P word of being present, because sometimes you gotta go back to the basics. Good old mac and cheese. My high schooler gave me the eye as I walked out the door with that this morning. She was like, so that idea, right, that we all have so much going on and feel like, are we really doing things well? Are we really finishing things? We start a million things. Most of you probably have those to-do lists. And maybe you cross off 1 or 2 things, but like the bulk of the list just rolls forward week to week to week. I actually have as a joke hanging on my bulletin board, my COVID to-do list. The beginning where you thought, I have time, I'm gonna go through all the closets, I'm gonna make those photo albums from when my kids were like 5, even though they're almost 20, I'm gonna get this stuff done. I think I crossed 2 things off of it, and there's still, and I just keep it there as a gentle reminder, a little smile, and I'm like, ha, didn't do that. So that's another thing. Thinking about how can we get more rest, get more sleep, maybe meditate a little more often, get some more exercise. How can we kind of focus a little more, maybe even be a little more, dare I say, efficient and sort of intentional in how we accomplish things. Also like you all to take a minute to think kind of what does work for you and maybe what doesn't work for you. Because often when we think about how to manage our own stress, we get these great ideas, right? We either see that great speaker, or read a new book or a blog post, or we hear a podcast, and we think, that's a great idea, I'm gonna do that. Some of those things may be reasonable and manageable, and some, again, we may have to think about how we tweak for ourselves. So if you take a moment and think what works well for you, and maybe what doesn't work for you. And I don't know if anyone wants to share something they realize that does help them, does sort of keep them on task, does help them get to the gym, does help them make that meditation, or something that maybe all their friends say is great, and they realize, well, that doesn't work for me.
Making a list with like time cut out into it.
Okay, and that does work for you? Or
No,
doesn't?
I fail miserably at it. That's apparently that's.
All right, that's awesome.
Love a bulletin board too. I mean, all of it. The chalkboard.
A giant thing of Q-tips, because sometimes you need a lot, and you can actually do all sorts of things with that. And even though the box says don't put them in your ear, we all put them in our ear all the time. All right, so kind of an example of, there are certain things out there that sort of, some people say this is so great, and it may work for them, and it just doesn't work for us. I'm going to talk a little bit more about to-do lists and schedules, because they can work in theory, but again, we have to think about the translation of how to make them work, because often they have that rebound effect, kind of like my COVID to-do list, where they often make us feel worse, because either they get longer and longer and longer, or we just don't get to them, and then we're carrying that, and that makes us more stressed and more frustrated and just feel badly. And unfortunately, when we feel badly, it doesn't work well for motivation. When we think about those great coaching speeches, and I know we just had the Super Bowl, right? If you think about Ted Lasso, or Friday Night Lights, or in these great coaching shows, those coaches don't go in there and be like, you didn't do absolutely everything you were supposed to do, and you feel your guys are really awful. Now go out there and win one, right? It doesn't work that way. It's all to hype you up, you can do this better. Finally, just taking a minute to think about something you'd like to try. Something maybe on that giant list of stress relievers or stress management skills. Something your friends have talked about, something you know in theory would probably be good for you. And maybe think, maybe I should give that a try. And maybe thinking of something that you've been clinging to a lot, feeling like I should be doing this and I'm going to keep trying this, but maybe something that's not working for you and something that you kind of want to let go. I don't know if anyone would like to share something from that list.
After COVID, we were just so excited in my family just like do things again that we were talking about people that they were scheduling. And so like I've gotten to a point where we were just doing everything and we were so burnt out that now I don't feel guilty anymore or not. I let that go. Because I found also my kids, like they weren't like happy doing it all either. So for me it was just like just realizing that you don't do everything, it's okay, and we're actually a little bit happier not doing it all.
So awesome. So kind of figuring out the pacing that works right for you and your family. So a little notebook to keep track, because journaling and writing things down when we do it kind of in a way that is helpful and effective can be really helpful. And I think pacing is a key thing that I'm going to talk a bit more about too. It was so hard during the pandemic, right? We all shut down. For many people, once things started opening, it was like, oh my gosh, everyone's running out of gate. We have to make up for lost time. We have to get this. For other people, they're like, no, I actually enjoy this. This actually worked for me. And everyone's been working, I think, as we come back to find that pace. And if there are things we can kind of hold on to and continue, of being really more intentional and thoughtful about the pacing that works for us. You'll notice I put a little asterisk by the your on recipe. The real challenge of this too is our recipe may not match our partners or our spouses and may not match our kids. And maybe it matches one of our kids, but not all of our kids. And the recipe that works well for your children may actually only work well for a few weeks, and then you may have to adjust it. The good old macaroni and cheese. I know when my kids were younger, the purple box was their favorite. So I went to Costco and got the giant, like 32 box of the purple. Of course, within a week, they decided the blue box was now their favorite. These things happen. So some of this is the flexibility that we have to kind of revisit that recipe, make sure it's working for us, and sometimes recognize the challenge of our recipe may not apply to everybody else. But today I really want to focus on for us. So the key ingredients of coming up with how we manage the stress. As I said, when we think about how we experience emotions, we experience them both in our brains and our bodies. Our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors. So when we think about how to manage emotions, we have to think about all those categories too. Unfortunately, we often forget that. One of my least favorite phrases is actually "don't worry." I think it's an awful phrase, right? Because when you're stressed and worrying, and someone says "don't stress, don't worry," it's sort of like, well, I would love that, like intellectually, that's a great, like fabulous. Who would have thought? Actually making that work is really challenging. And often when we think about how we feel when we're flooded with emotion, when we're stressed, when all those things are heightened, again, it's that full body experience. We often try, if you think about like a seesaw, and your emotions are flooded, and kind of your thinking brain, if you will, is offline. We're all emotion in the moment. Okay, this is like impossible to do with my hands. So we have our seesaw, we have our emotions, we have our sort of emotions don't like to listen to reason, and that intellectual thinking part of our brain is offline anyway, we can't focus. Another way, if we think about it, is if we get that thinking brain back online, it kind of automatically brings our emotions back in gear. It's why, actually, I'll talk about it in a few minutes. Rihanna did have these problems at the Super Bowl, just saying. I'm also not swinging on the thing, so that's cool. Anyway, so, when we think about that, there are different ways, but we go for those emotions, and emotions are hard to control. They're hard to manage. We have a little bit better access if we think about both how we use our thoughts, how we focus our brain, shift our attention, and also those physical outputs, right? That mood meter. If I'm feeling that higher energy, maybe I can dispel some of that energy. That will bring me back into balance. And now I'm in kind of a better place. I'm a little more grounded and more able to manage my emotions. So I'd like to talk today about a few ideas of how you can do this. And really this idea of management. That there are ways we can manage. So I use M's because I like simple things that when I'm stressed and when I'm flooded, I can be easy to remember the go-tos. So I'm going to talk today about what I call my 5 M's of management. And the first one really gets at that cognitive aspect of thinking a mantra for your mindset. That sometimes the way we think about things really does impact how we feel about them. So let's say I was running late this morning, which I actually wasn't, which is really pretty cool. But anyway, usually I run late, right? And if as I'm running late and I'm driving here, on my way here, if I continually think of, I can't believe how late I am. I can't, what was I thinking, right? I knew I had to leave early, and maybe I'm annoyed because part of what made me late is I had to bring out the garbage bins, and I'm ruminating on this idea of, I told my daughter to take out the garbage bin, she didn't do it, and no one else fed the dog. And I'm just reviewing and sort of thinking of those thoughts over and over. What do you think is going to happen to my emotions? Am I going to be nice and calm, or do you think I'm going to stay in that heightened state of stress and frustration? To stay in that heightened state of stress and frustration, right? If I get in my car and I go, you know what? I'm later than I thought I would be. That's a bummer. I can do a little review and go, okay, it's very clear how I got here. I'll remember that next time. But now I'm going to shift my focus, because now I'm going to go meet all these really interesting people, and I'm going to get to give a talk, and I'm actually going to get to meet a person, which I haven't been in a while. That's pretty cool. I'm going to focus on that. Again, that's a way that changing my thoughts dilutes some of my emotion, rather than focusing, and it sort of fans the flames, if you will. There's no magic mantra, and there's no magic mindset. A lot of times people will say, think positive. That's challenging to do sometimes. Sometimes thinking neutral is pretty good too. It's just that idea of trying to think of things through a different vantage point. These quotable cards, people have probably seen, they have them in the grocery store. I literally have on my bulletin board at home about 15 of them, and I often in the morning kind of go through what's today's, right? Is it begin anywhere? Is it, any of these other things? What's going to work for me? You can also come up with anyone for yourself. I have clients do this all the time. Some of them I can't say out loud in an elementary school, but anything that works for you. Just that reminder of I need to cue myself to consider a different vantage point. And again, it doesn't have to be things are going to be great, not at all. Things may not be so bad. That works too. What's one thing? People often talk about gratitude and compassion. Finding something that shifts our focus can be really beneficial. Back to that idea we said of that social connection, right? The idea of finding needs. Finding either people or canines. Yes, that is my dog Nellie in the center. Nellie, actually, I don't think we were here. She used to be a trained therapy dog, so we visit schools, libraries, and hospitals and things. She's now a senior, like me, heading close to retirement. But, this idea of people being together with people is amazing. It really does impact us. People may have heard of the idea of the oxytocin hug. So literally sometimes just hugging someone can actually shift your body chemistry. Petting a dog releases cortisol almost immediately. There's amazing research out there now on human-animal interaction. So this idea of having someone or something that you can talk to, that you can be with, has really amazing protective health factors for us. In person is great. Also, eating together can be a really shared, great experience as well. And if we can't do that in person, whether it's a Zoom phone or a phone call, anything that just gives us a minute can be really helpful of just that point of connection. And we forget that sometimes, right? We may have a dinner scheduled with friends, but, oh, my kids have homework, there's a game, someone's sick, I gotta go home, I don't have time. Keeping those as really essential things, they're not supplementary, they really are essential. So really kind of thinking of who are the mates that you want to surround yourself with, and finding time to preserve that. Movement. Again, one of those hallmarks on every one of those lists that we Google, you'll often see physical activity or movement. That movement is a great way to off-gas some of those emotions, some of that energy. It gets us a really natural boost of those great chemicals like dopamine that make us feel better. And the nice thing about movement is it can be anything. So if you're a runner, great, go run. If you don't like running, dance around in your kitchen. Do some jumping jacks, practice a yoga pose. Any kind of physical movement. And in fact, if you're sitting in one space, the same way we talked about kind of ruminating on those thoughts, if I'm sitting at my desk staring at that paper or that blank computer screen that I can't figure out, or just staring at the pile, literally getting up, changing my view, looking out the window. Even as a teacher, my walking from here to there, every neuron in your brain just changes the way it's looking at me. If I stand here and we talk this whole time, you kind of zone out, everything looks fine. You're like, oh, I know what she looks like, I can zone out. I move, everything in your brain just fired. I'm like, oh, hold on, something's happening. That can help distract us. So literally, it doesn't mean, oh my gosh, I have to go through a walk in any of the beautiful trails around here. It can just be, I'm actually gonna stand up and look outside my window. I'm actually gonna walk down my hall and pay attention to, like, look at the ceiling, look at the floor. Getting up and moving and doing anything. And I think often we come up with these goals that are so big, right? I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna run 5 miles. You know what? Sometimes doing 2 minutes of jumping jacks in your office or in your house, that's fine too. Walk to go get the mail, come back, that's fine too. So anything that can really help you move. The irony too, so the picture of the 2 girls in the kayaks, those are actually my daughters from many years ago. It's actually down by Longshore in Westport, where you can rent canoes, kayaks, paddleboards. It's great. You rent them, you take them out. I took my kids out because they were having one of those days where I'm like, we need to get outside. I felt like the greatest mother in the world. Look at my kids, we're outside, I'm doing what I say. Literally within 2 minutes of taking that picture, one pushed the other out of the kayak, they started screaming at each other. Really good times. But for a few minutes it worked, and then we got everything back to the kayak, and it became something funny we talked about. So this is something also, when we think about doing movement, we can model this for our kids, right? Sometimes it's, great, I need to go for a run, I need to go for a walk, and I want that time for myself. Sometimes if you notice your kids, your spouse, your friends, we can do that together. And in fact, you know, going biking, going walking with a friend, you get the double, because now we've got that social aspect, and we've got that movement, and if we take a moment and sort of look around, now we're changing our mindset too. So there are really nice ways to combine these things. Momentary respite. That is our moment of zen, our little island, our getaway. And you know, a lot of times we wait till we're so stressed, and then we plan that weekend away or that dinner out. And those are fantastic for the big reset, but we can build in all these little moments throughout the day of just momentary respite. Taking a moment to give ourselves a little break, not waiting till we get so frustrated, not waiting for the big burnout that justifies my getaway and my big relief. Building in those little moments throughout that help off-gas. Some of these can also, again, be combined with others. The first thing I have, that's something called Spelling Bee. It's part of the New York Times Games. I see a few people devoted. I did not try it yet today. Usually that is my morning meditation, if you will. It's the first thing I do when I get up. I have a brain that wakes up automatically and is off to the races. What do I have to do? What do I have to do? That is my moment of, okay, let me give my brain something good to chew on, something to work on. Okay, now let me think about my day. There are tons of them. There are tile games, there are all sorts of things. It can be a great way, again, when you find that you're ruminating and you're stuck on something, you're thinking about stress, maybe the mindset's not working, maybe your 5 minutes of jumping jacks isn't working. Give yourself something else to focus on, get that thinking brain back online. Comedians can be great things. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world. The news can bombard you. Many of us also get these alerts moment by moment on our phone. You can actually turn off those alerts. Don't tell people, Apple, I told you, but you can. You don't need to get them sent to you. You can set, I'm going to look at the news in the morning, and I'm going to look at the news in the afternoon. That's it. I'm setting my boundary. Instead, as you're driving along, if you're kind of feeling stressed, that is the nice thing about the internet. You can listen to a comedian at any time tell a funny joke, and laughter is actually really good for you. It actually resets. Again, gives you a nice burst of some of those lovely chemicals and hormones. The other picture is the panda camp from the panda camp at the National Zoo. I get no kickbacks from the National Zoo, but I am madly obsessed with the panda camp. It is bookmarked. It's literally just a camera that watches 2 pandas at the National Zoo. And there was one born, I think he's like a year and a half now. It is the most lovely thing to watch. It's like people watch those nature videos, people listen to waves. In my house, I've been known to shout, Panda Camp 2, check out Panda Camp 2, you have to see what he's doing right now. Sometimes that, again, is a great transition if you need your moment, if you're stuck in the office, if, again, all you see are the dishes and the laundry and the camp forms and blah, blah, blah. It's just a way to shift your focus and can give you that really nice little moment of zen. And finally, music. Music is a wonderful thing that we have now so much access to. You can have your happy playlist, you can have your sad playlist, you can have your song that you dance around and jump around to. You can engage your children in doing that with you. Let's pick a song, let's get the Wiggles out, let's get the blues out, let's get the whatever out and dance around. It's something great to have access to. And finally, the last M, mindfulness. There's a lot of buzz about mindfulness, and mindfulness comes in many, many forms. The idea of mindfulness and the key to it is this idea of non-judgmental awareness. It's that idea of being aware of what's going on in our brain, acknowledging it, and hopefully sort of shifting focus where you can. Mindfulness is not competitive. People forget that sometimes. Same thing with meditation. There's not a right way and a wrong way to do any of these things. It's figuring out what works for you. Some people have that idea of I'm going to sit in lotus position, I'm going to Om, I'm going to have my mat, and I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes. That's amazing if it can work for you. For some busy brain people, that version does not work for them. For some children, that version does not work for them. That's okay. Again, just like that lasagna recipe, we want to find what works for you. The idea of mindfulness is similar to momentary respite and really can be both a cognitive and a physical sensation of helping you be aware of what's going on in your mind, because if we're not aware of it, it's hard to know what to do with it, and then figuring out sort of how to piece it. You know, I like to say mindfulness has got like a Tai Chi, not a fly swatter, so if you're sitting here thinking, I should be listening to her, I think she's got some good things to say, and I just recognized, I think we're out of milk, and I also think I left my blue sweater at the cleaners, rather than going like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? That's so terrible that I'm supposed to be mindful in this moment and thinking of this. It's sort of a Tai Chi gentle where you just go, not now. One of the key things of mindfulness or meditation is back to the breath, back to where I am. We have distractions all the time. This machine in there is funky. It picks up signals left and right. That's okay. It's making me think of this. It's making me think of this. Okay, back to now. And it's a really great way that we can help ground ourselves and feel a little more sort of stable and solid and give us a better vantage point from which to figure out how to manage some of these things. There are some great meditation apps. Again, some of those word games you can use as a form of mindfulness, Rubik's Cube. A to Z is one of my favorites. No matter how stressed or frustrated you may be, once we're done with elementary school, we usually remember the ABCs. They're kind of grounded. In those moments where our brains are racing and our bodies feel all bad, if we take a moment and pick a category. It's around breakfast time, so let's think foods. Can anyone tell me a food that starts with A? Just yell it out. Any food that starts with A? Apple.
Artichoke.
Nice. B.
Banana.
Bread, lovely. C. What was that? Cookies, I like, no, thank you. We usually don't get to the good stuff till D for donuts. No, we don't. So we got cookies, I heard corn, D. Donuts, I mean, come on. It should be first on everyone's mind. E, just a little bit of challenge. Eggs, very nice. F.
French fry.
Love you guys. Okay, G. Nice. H. popping in your brain? Are you thinking like, oh, I should have said this for F, or this is an idea for H? It's again, one of those great ways to kind of hijack your brain and get it back online. When you're thinking of a million things, my brain is flooded, all right, let's give it something shiny, let's get it to focus elsewhere. If I said to you, don't think about pink elephants, don't think about pink elephants, do not think about pink elephants. What's everyone thinking about? Pink elephants, right? So it's this idea when we say don't worry, don't stress about that, it kind of magnifies it. And rather than don't do that, give yourself something else to focus on. Another one is what I like to call the rainbow game. So look around this room. Can anyone find anything that's red? It's Valentine's Day. There's some good stuff, okay? Orange. It's actually with all the colors and words, it's fantastic. So wherever you are, and it's again another way to kind of be mindful and focus your brain. So I'm going to ground myself to where I am instead of not only thinking of all the things I have to do, but those worries about my kid, even though they're in elementary school, I'm worried about, I don't know, what college they're going to get into, are they going to marry the right person, what kind of job they're going to have. Let me bring myself back to now. So let me either do an alphabet game, let me look around wherever, any room I'm in, find something for every color of the rainbow, or find something for every shape I can. It's a way to just kind of bring you back to now and help you get back to that more solid ground, then we can manage things a little bit better. So I have here this idea of scheduling for sustenance. Those to-do lists, those schedules. We love to make schedules, we love to make plans, but often we forget about reality when we're making them. I know I fall to this all the time. I'm pretty good at doing many things and getting things done quickly, but I often think that I can move at the speed of light, and then everyone else around me can move at the speed of light. And especially when we have young kids, we do this sometimes too, right? We can get out the door in 5 minutes, and we forget. It takes our kids like 3 days to get out the door, so we plan this, and then we get frustrated, and then they get frustrated, and they don't know what's going on, and we go, you know what time it is, and they go, no, I actually don't care about time, it means nothing to me, and the cycle repeats. So some of this is being a little more sort of thoughtful and intentional about when we schedule these things, and the idea is we want to sustain it. We don't want this to be, oh, because I saw Michelle speak, and she had these good ideas, I'm gonna do this stuff this week, and next week it all falls apart. We want to find ways to continue this. So this idea of building in and blocking the time, being realistic about the time we have and blocking it. The same way you block it for this meeting, the same way you block it for a child's pediatrician appointment or an important work phone call. Often the stuff for ourselves is the stuff in pencil that gets crossed off, and we don't actually even write it down because it doesn't merit that. So putting it in pen and publicizing it, telling everyone, whether you tell your partner, whether you tell your kids, I'm going to go for a walk tomorrow after school. I am going to spend an hour reading something for fun on Saturday. That you want everyone else to be aware so they know. Remember, I said I was doing this. It's on the calendar just like everything else is. I'm claiming that time. And sometimes if you actually share that with a friend too, again, how do we sustain those habits? How do we keep ourselves motivated? That can help it. So if I say I'm going to go on a walk by myself or run by myself, I might be less likely that I am meeting my friend at 9:15 at the Newark River Valley Trail. I am much less likely to stand her up. I'm much more likely for myself to be like, it's a little cold actually. I don't think I'm gonna go do this today. But if I know she's going there, to have to call her and say, I don't know about this, that's harder for me to do. She's gonna help give me some incentive and keep me there. Flexibility is often key. That idea of those to-do lists with the times. From 3 to 4, I am going to do this thing. We don't leave ourselves a lot of option. If I'm going to run 5 miles from 3 to 4, I just made my sort of goal very tiny, and I gave myself no flexibility. Whereas if I say, by the end of this week, I am going to try and exercise for 30 minutes, lots of flexibility, more likely to achieve that. Because if today I don't feel good or if it's cold, no big deal, I still have a few days. If I wake up on Friday and I say, you know what, I wanted to go for a run, but I slept badly and my neck hurts, maybe I'll just do some yoga. Maybe I'll just do some walk. Much more likely. And this goes back to that idea of think about where we started and know yourself. If you know, also, you've never run before, maybe the goal shouldn't be running 5 miles this week. Maybe the goal is jogging for 10 minutes. If you know it takes to organize your closet, that's like a whole day thing, don't schedule that for Saturday between 9 and 9:15. It's just not going to happen. So being thoughtful and flexible about that. and finding a way to reinforce ourselves, acknowledging the effort, not just the outcome, right? Maybe I didn't run the whatever miles, but I got up and I exercised for 2 days a week. Maybe I didn't do my whole closet, but I did my whole sweater drawer. That's something. And telling our family and friends about that, being like, you know what I did? I feel good about that. It's a great way to reinforce ourselves and model for our kids. And I know I'm like up on time, if not over. This is one of my favorite cartoons, how she's able to manage a career and still juggle her family. I'll never know. I think this idea of balance and juggling things, balance looks a little different for everybody. And this idea that we're always perfectly in balance, no, we'd like to keep the seesaw from wobbling too much, but finding that balance for works for us and letting go of some things. Not letting those eggs crash on the floor, but sometimes saying, you know what, I need to let go of that. That will help me stay grounded. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I would love to just open it up to questions, comments, things that anyone is struggling with or stuck on. And I just also want to acknowledge, thank you all for being here and taking the time to be here. I hope this gives you some ideas of something that you can come up with your recipe and your version, and anything that I can help with. So, any questions?
Going back to the list. So sometimes I make the list and I write it down, and it is a release, and of course then it's a stressor because it's all you have to do. So how do you kind of reconcile the two?
Sure. So and when we're making these lists, sometimes kind of categorizing, prioritizing, right? So you do, your first is just your dump, right? Let me write down everything I can think of. For some people, and again, this is a little bit of knowing yourself, some people organize by priority. So it's like absolutely urgent, must do, would like to do, ideally would be great if there's a snowstorm and everything else in the world stops and I have all the time to do it, right? So that can sort of help rather than, oh my gosh, this list is so long. So sometimes doing that kind of categorization. Some people use like a temporal sequence. What do I need to get done in the next 48 hours? What do I need to get done in the next 3 days, next month, next week? I would like to do it by the end of this year, is another way to kind of help you stagger. I really recommend actually writing it down in some way, shape, or form, because it gets really loud and noisy when it all swirls in here, and it takes on like exponential qualities. And sometimes when we write it down, we're like, oh, actually, those 4 things, I can do those in like 25 minutes. Okay, those are knocked off. So finding a way, some people like to keep a particular journal or a particular book. Nighttime's a time when a lot of us, like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about it. So some people will keep a little notebook next to their bed. Let me just jot it down. I'm a big fan of actually scheduling worry time for both kids and adults, right? Don't schedule it before you go to bed. Not a great idea. Sometimes having that, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna make my big list, I'm gonna take just the top 2 things. That's all. And then maybe later in the afternoon, I'll look back at the list, I'm gonna take another 2. And so giving yourself that chance to review it and structuring it that way. I wish I could say here's the exact. That's where kind of reflecting on like what works for you. As you said, for some people, the lists make them nuts. This is also that idea of you versus your spouse or partner or children. I like a good long list. Like it actually is soothing to me to make a big long list. I have one child, if you give her more than 3 things, it's like her head will explode. So even though in my mind, and same thing temporally, toddlers and teenagers are a lot alike. If I'm talking about next weekend for my teenager, she looks at me like I'm talking about the year 3042, like so beyond, or like I'm already talking about spring break plans. That is well beyond where she can grapple. Similar of like where we maybe you're hosting a dinner party on Saturday. You already think about the menu, you already think about what has to get cleaned out. You may have a spouse or a partner who's like, I don't need to know that until, I don't know, like 4 o'clock on Saturday, so why are we going over these details again and again? Sometimes you can say, because darling, it actually helps me. And again, here's where instead of waiting till 4:45, could we maybe do this like Friday at 5? Or kind of recognizing, okay, that I'm gonna off gas in my way, here's the piece I'm gonna share. Other questions? Well, thank you all. So appreciate you being here, and Marina, some very helpful little tip sheets to hand out.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much, Dr. Albright. Cares Way, we were trying to put things together for you guys to take home. So a lot of this is actually what she had talked about. So this is just a take-home reminder for you for different things. So please take this out on your way out. And also, there is a QR code for a survey to say if you enjoyed this or not, and we would love for you guys to maybe give us a little feedback. And also, with feedback, other things you guys would like to hear from CARES. I need to know what's out there in the community for people. I mean, I love this because I was able to talk to parents and with the CARES reps and get information and feedback for us to bring to you guys. So